Hello, third grade. Happy Friday. I am going to read you chapter 9 of I Survived the Great Chicago Fire. So yesterday we read chapter 8, and at the end, Oscar was telling Jenny and Bruno that they needed to get back to the Palmer House Hotel because that's where Mama was and that they would be safe there. So they started their journey through the streets of Chicago. And let's see where their journey takes them. Chapter 9, Monday, October 9th, 12:15 a.m. The south side of Chicago heading north. So remember, 12:15 a.m. is like when you're sleeping. So this is in the middle of the night. They left Jenny and Bruno's burning neighborhood behind and headed north. Oscar kept looking over his shoulder at that giant orange glow bleeding through the sky. The main fire was huge now, Oscar could see, and it was spreading fast. And the wind was carrying sparks all over the city. Everywhere Oscar looked, he saw new fires burning. Some fires were very small, a ribbon of flame waving from a tree, a pile of garbage glowing like a campfire. But there were burning houses everywhere, and in places, the smoke was so thick that they had to gasp for breath. But Oscar's gasps also came from what was happening all around them. People sobbing and screaming, horses driven crazy by the heat and sparks, stray dogs howling in fear. Even the rats were running for their lives, rushing out from under the wooden sidewalks and getting squashed under the wheels of the wagons and buggies that plowed through the streets. The crowds got bigger as they moved north. Many people were dragging trunks and suitcases or struggling with heavy sacks heaved over their shoulders. Two women in nightgowns carried a mattress above their heads. On top was a very old man curled up under a quilt. So I don't know about you guys, but this is making it very easy for me to create a picture in my head of what's happening. The fires turned the night as bright as day, lighting up the terrified faces all around Oscar. The tear-stained cheeks, the mouths open in horror, the wide open eyes looking up at the sky. But the worst part was the howling wind, which seemed to be getting stronger by the minute. Each hot gust was filled with dust and smoke and spit out millions of embers and sparks. One burned a hole clear through the toe of Oscar's boot. Oscar passed a woman just as her skirts erupted into flames. Luckily, the man next to her had a canteen of water and quickly drenched her. Remember, a couple chapters back, we talked about why water is used to take out fires. So that's what that man used there. The sparks were terrible for Oscar and Jenny, but they tortured poor Bruno. Hot, hot, he kept saying, trying to bury his face in Oscar's neck. Finally, Jenny spotted an overturned wheelbarrow with a heap of clothes spilling out. She snatched a lady's hat, its purple velvet smudged with dirt, the wide brim crushed. I don't think anyone will miss this, she said. She put it on Bruno's head, a perfect helmet to protect his curls. She kept her eyes on Oscar, swatting away embers that came too close to his face or smoldered on his clothes. Oscar was getting the idea there wasn't much Jenny couldn't take care of. They came to a corner where a crowd of people had stopped to watch a grand brick building burn. Oscar and Jenny tried to push their way through, but they were completely hemmed in, so they were stuck. And then, suddenly, the clanging of bells rose above the roar of the fire. Pause the book. Close your book. What do you think that sound of the bells was? Fire department, someone shouted. People jumped out of the way as two steam pumper wagons came tearing around the corner, each pulled by two sweating horses. A hose wagon followed. Oscar's heart lifted a bit, so this probably gave him some hope that it was going to get better. He remembered what Mr. Morrow had told them, that Chicago had the best fire department in the world, and here was their chance to prove it. Maybe they could save at least part of the city. People in the crowd watched hopefully as about 15 firefighters hopped off the wagons and got to work, readying the pumper and uncoiling the heavy canvas hoses. In Castle, there was no fire department or pumper engines. When a fire broke out, people had to rely on themselves and their neighbors. During the big fire, a flurry of sparks had ignited the roof of Oscar's barn. Within minutes, 30 people had rushed to their farm, ready to help. They grabbed every bucket and jug they could find and formed a bucket brigade. Mama and 2 other women had stood at the well, filling the buckets as fast as they could. Everyone else lined up, forming a human chain that led from the well to the barn. So if you can imagine a line of people who are passing water buckets to keep throwing on the fire. Oscar stood on the line, passing sloshing buckets of cold water toward the fire. It was amazing how those heavy buckets flew across the chain of hands, how the splashes of water tamed the flames. Oscar had kept going even after his arms were numb with pain. It had taken an hour, but they'd put the fire out. The roof of the barn was burned through, but the rest of the building still stood. Here's a picture. So you can see the horses riding through, and you can kind of see up here the fire and the smoke in the sky. Oscar would never forget how happy he felt when the last of the flames fizzled out, as if he'd helped slay a monster. He watched now as the firefighters dragged the heavy coils over to the burning buildings, screaming at people in the crowd to stand back as the pumper engines roared and water pulsed into the hoses. Like soldiers in battle, the men aimed their hoses. Cheers rose up from the crowd as thick, powerful sprays of water blasted up at the flames. Very quickly, Oscar realized that the firefighters didn't stand a chance. The fire was too big and too hot, so Oscar kind of thought that the firefighters might die in the fire. The water hissed as it got close to the flames and then boiled away into puffs of steam. With every gust of wind, the flames rose higher, twisting and dancing in the sky as though teasing the firefighters. They'd need an ocean to put out those flames, Oscar reckoned, or a bucket brigade of 1,000 people. "Come on," Jenny said, spotting a break in the crowd. As they pushed their way through, Oscar turned to take a last look at the firefighters. There was no mistaking the fear on their faces. There was no doubt. Chicago was doomed. We're going to have to wait and see what happens, but make some predictions. What do you think might happen next?